Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this video is about how Narendra Modi is undermining India's freedom. Now, in case you don't know, Narendra Modi has been Prime Minister of India for the past few years. China has attacked India in recent months, and instead of defending India, Modi seems to be trying to turn India into China. Now, I think he's not going to go all the way, but one of the magnificent things I've always admired about India is that since 1947, it's been democratic. A bit hiatus in the mid 70s when a lot of people, well, certainly in the Western world, they doubted whether this was applicable to an Asian country, particularly looking at India in the late 40s, where most people were illiterate. But no, it survived and people's rights have been respected. And India is a country where you'd receive a fair trial. And that really is admirable. Some of the more economically developed countries didn't manage, or still don't manage to this day. But unfortunately, India's liberty is under assault from the current Modi administration. So, Prime Minister Modi, he's leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, as in that means Indian People's Party. I suppose to emphasize their Indianness, they've got the name of the party in Hindi, not using the English words. And of course, party is a loan word from English in Hindi these days. So Shri Modi was born in Gujarat, India. That's one of the westernmost states. Grew up in a relatively humble background, his father being a tea seller. They were from one of the so-called backward castes who needed positive discrimination to help them. Well, de minimis incepe, see what he's achieved. So he was in the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh for some time as the National Volunteers Movement, RSS, which is a Hindu nationalist organization briefly banned after Indian independence because of the assassination of Gandhi by an RSS member. So though he was married in his teens, he and his wife split, never actually divorced. So a bit ascetic, a little bit like Atal Bihari Vajpayee, but not as admirable. And so Mr. Modi, he was really a full-time activist for the RSS in his early adulthood, went into hiding in the 70s, because remember 1975 to 77 was a state of emergency under Indira Gandhi when she was Prime Minister, and civil liberties were suspended, and that was disgraceful. Now, the BJP hasn't gone as far. The situation is not as difficult as it was in the mid-70s, and these days Congress are the good guys. So Modi was chief minister of his native state, and way back in 2002 there was a horrific incident in which a train was stopped, hundreds of Muslim pilgrims were murdered, some Hindus were murdered in retaliation. So there was a lot of communal violence in Gujarat for a few weeks when he was chief minister, and he at the very least was ineffectual in stopping it. Some people would say he was complicit in all this. He was banned from visiting the United States for several years because of that. When it became clear he was likely to become prime minister, the US lifted its ban on his travel there. And indeed, he's visited the United States on a number of occasions and been very warmly received. But he seems to be following the example of authoritarians. He's changed the law, allowing him more discretion to appoint judges, when previously the judiciary themselves had a greater role in picking who went on the bench. So he set up a new planning commission, which is controlled by the Prime Minister. You could say this is streamlining or modernizing a government, but really it's the accretion of greater powers in his hands. So it's making the executive overmighty. The separation of powers has been enfeebled by the Prime Minister. So he's had the Intelligence Bureau investigate various charities. Right, there might be a prima facie case for them to be investigated, but some people say this is really a witch hunt, which is actuated by political considerations. Médecins Sans Frontières has been banned. This is a very admirable charity about providing medical relief to those in need. Amnesty International, which is a disinterested human rights organization, don't always agree with them. I think sometimes they go too far, but really they say everybody has the right to fair trial. Nobody should be sent to jail unless they've been proved guilty of a crime. No suspension of civil liberties, no suspension of habeas corpus, no torture under any circumstances whatsoever, and so forth. Freedom of expression, they take up the case of those who are prisoners of conscience. They speak out against political prisoners being detained. So that's Amnesty. Overall, they're laudable, and they've done good work in India. India hasn't had that much call for Amnesty International to speak up. Most countries have a much worse record. Of course, no country is perfect, but they have fallen victim to Modi. Why? What's he got to be afraid of? So his governments have repealed 1,200 laws, which is more than all the governments of India in the previous 64 years. Now, it depends which law we're talking about. It might be absolutely right to repeal a law, and incidentally, obviously respect the right of the Parliament of India to repeal these laws. Now, some Indians will say, "How dare I poke my white snout into India's domestic affairs?" Well, I have the absolute right to voice my opinion on the affairs of any country, foreign or my own, just as you watching this, please feel welcome to mouth off on the domestic affairs of the Republic of Ireland or indeed the UK. Go ahead. Of course you have that right. You don't need me to tell you that. Say what you think. I might vehemently disagree with you. I might see eye to eye with you. But in either case, I would never question your right to express your opinions on such issues. So he's had this campaign to have things made in India. Now, autarky can be laudable. Most countries want to have this. In Ireland, we have this buy Irish or guaranteed Irish thing, which goes totally against the spirit of the European Union. I don't know how we can be good little Europeans with that. In the United Kingdom, one sees buy British and so forth. But at least the UK is out of the EU, so that's not hypocritical anymore. Some people think that that's praiseworthy, his Made in India campaign. Why should we be paying to buy these expensive imports? Why should we be sending money abroad when we can make it here? And then we're self-sufficient in case supply lines are cut off for some reason. But some people say, well, this is rather xenophobic, this whole Made in India thing. And it was a bit xenophobic when it happens anywhere else too. So he's gone in for liberalisation and privatisation, and this has been widely applauded by many. It's won acclamation from many economic experts. So he's had some criticism from the CPI, though. So he's attempted to compulsorily purchase land on a huge scale, which has not met with everybody's approval. But he demonetized banknotes, the larger denomination banknotes, I think 500 rupees and 1,000 rupees, in an attempt to cut out peculation and graft, which is almost endemic in Indian politics. There were severe cash shortages because of that. So, he's failed in some ways, and some of this is not really to do with him assaulting liberty. That unemployment has grown, obviously particularly due to coronavirus, and the country has grown richer, sometimes 7% economic growth in a year, which is phenomenal, but there's a growing wealth gap. And there's some people who have and have a lot, and that's fabulous, but there are people who are left behind as well. So he's broadened the definition of sedition. He's tried to stifle freedom of expression. So muzzling the media is really the first step on the road to totalitarian perdition, blocking certain media sites and so on. And perhaps his most troubling trait is his promotion of Hindutva, which isn't really new. I mean, since independent India has always been there. It's not been a major thing. The BJP pushing it more in the 70s, becoming very popular in the 90s. Lal Krishnan Advani, really the face of Hindu nationalism. And the Babri Masjid issue has come to the fore again. In case you don't know, it was a huge around 1992 ructions over this. So Aurangzeb, this Mughal emperor in the 16th century, he had a policy of leveling Hindu temples and trying to build mosques in room of them. And so this was done at hundreds of sites all over North India in particular, where the Mughal grip was stronger. And so they demolished the mandir there, and they built a new one on that site. Babri Masjid, I think it's actually Babur, that was it the first Mughal emperor did it. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but it's called Babri, as in an allusion to Babur, at Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh. So, and so this was Col Célèbre. It was very close to the heart of the BJP, RSS, and so forth. So they gathered lots of stones and various materials which were meant to be used to build that in 1992, surrounding it, thousands of them. The police had to draft in scores of officers to try and protect the mosque, and these police officers, most of them were Hindu, and it was a real test of their loyalties, because they're being asked by the RSS to decide which side are you on. Are you a Hindu or not? Of course you should want this mosque to be built here. And remember, this was a sacred spot to Hindus. The mosque could have been built anywhere. There was no particular significance to that location to Muslims. I mean, I think the Muslim community of India would have been best advised to say, you know what, we'll make it a gift. You can have it. You can knock it down and build it. We'll build a mosque somewhere else. It doesn't matter that much to us. But feeling was running very high at the time, and it was reported in the media. There was a lot of Indophobic attacks overseas, particularly in Muslim majority countries, like in Pakistan. The much beleaguered Hindu community was set upon, and they suffered many attacks on their temples because of what had happened at Babri Masjid. Indian Airlines, so Air India officers being trashed in other countries, Saudi Arabia recalling the ambassador. But anyway, though some of the demonstrators got in and managed to wreck a bit of the mosque, overall the mosque was saved. The Supreme Court of India decided that it would stay a mosque. And then D Company, it was Dawood Ibrahim, that Mumbai gangster, his gang setting off bombs on the Mumbai metro, killing hundreds of people in 1992. So it's an issue which separated since then. It managed to calm down. The situation is much more placid for decades, but there's been a recrudescence of this Babri Masjid issue. And this is a stated goal of the Prime Minister. He would like to see that it razed to the ground, Babri Masjid, and a Hindu temple erected on that site when one formerly stood. So that's quite troubling there. I mean, I do have some sympathy with the Hindu community on this issue. As I say, I know that location is sacred to them, whereas it's not to Mohammedans. But the sacrality of the spot doesn't give them the legal right to do so. And if the Muslims are not willing to hand it over, people just have to accept that. Remember, the Republic of India is a secular state, and got to hand it to the justices of the Supreme Court of India. They went by the old Latin tag, fiat justitia ruat caelum. They weren't going to be led by mob pressure. But it's not wrong to do what the mob wants if that happens to be just. But they acted without fear, without favour. Damn the consequences, they did the right thing, even when that was deeply inconvenient for politicians. So the citizenship law is also very pernicious, came out a couple of years ago, saying that non-Hindus, unless they can document their Indian citizenship, will be assumed to be foreign. Remember, until recent decades, a lot of people in India had no birth certificate, really had no documentation on them. Censuses were not always very accurate. So obviously there was no Bangladesh until, 1947. Okay, or East Pakistan as it was originally. People going back and forth, and the borders weren't even very strictly enforced after that for a while. I know with Pakistan from 47 it was rather strictly enforced. People who'd come in from Myanmar or wherever, or Bhutan, and if they happened not to be Hindu, they're simply going to be assumed to be a foreigner, to have no right to be there. So he's won the admiration of Hindu traditionalists. I'm not saying the average Hindu, I'm not against them at all. And the BJP has got an appeal beyond those who are practicing Hindus, people who like them for the economic progress they've achieved, for their competence, for their being not that corrupt, for them not being Congress, not being communist, things like that. A party for every man, attempts to crack down on corruption, and of course, he's won plaudits for that. So some Hindu fundamentalists have expressed admiration of Nathuram Godse, the one who bombed off Mohammed Karamchand Gandhi in January 1948. And the RSS openly assists the BJP. I'm not saying that the RSS is all bad, but they're against what they would see as decadence, Western pollution of Indian culture, Valentine's Day, or alcohol, or love matches. They'd like arranged marriages and uphold traditional Indian culture. So a little bit xenophobic. You'll get this in all countries. And I don't think the majority of Hindus go with that. Some would ask, well, if Pakistan's going to be the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, shouldn't India be the Hindu Republic of India, or have Hindustan as its official name? That's just an alternative name, like there's a newspaper, the Hindustan Times, and so on. So he's done other contentious things, Modi, like appointing Rao to the Indian Council of Historical Research, when people say that Mr. Rao's credentials as an academic are slender, to say the least. And this is really because he thinks that Rao will write in furtherance of his own Hindu nationalist agenda. The Hindutva idea is that to be a proper Indian, you must be Hindu. They might accept, say, Sikhs or Jains or Buddhists as being strange types of Hindus, but Muslims can't be real Indians, shouldn't have full rights, should be discriminated against, and that the government should actively promote and further Hinduism, funding it, having laws to privilege Hinduism and so on. Now, it is the religion of 80% of the population, but you can have a majority religion and still have a secular state. Like the Republic of Ireland, about 90% Christian. We've been a secular state since 1971. The law didn't entirely reflect that, but gradually laws have been repealed, which were specifically enshrining Catholic dogma in legislation. So that when there's a secular state, the state does not support or oppose any faith, is strictly neutral on religious affairs. You can be religious, you can be non-religious, you can be anti-religious, and it's no business of the state. Muslims are often accused of being non-citizens. There's some anti-Muslim animus because of Pakistan. To be fair, some Indians, particularly in Jammu and Kashmir, if they're Muslim, would be pro-Pakistan. I don't think it's most of them. And as India very proudly points out, there are more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. India is the second most populous Muslim country in the world, and India's done quite a lot to help its Muslim minority, banning the satanic verses and so on. I think sometimes doing too much, wrongly, but there we go. And of course, there are mosques in just about any Indian city. Anyway, another thing Modi did was to put up an enormous statue of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the first Home Minister of India, in his native state of Gujarat, of course, where Modi's from as well. So this Colossus is the tallest statue ever built. I don't think that was entirely a bad thing. Vallabhbhai Patel was a much more respectable figure than Modi, and one of his many accomplishments was persuading almost all of the 585 princely states to opt for either India or Pakistan, majority for India, of course, and who unfortunately died only about 2 years after independence. Well, that's my take on why Modi is bad news. And I don't think he's full-on totalitarian. I think he probably doesn't actually even want to go that far. So I mustn't overstate it. He's not a would-be Mussolini or something, but he's certainly degraded democracy. So this is really a retrograde and regrettable trend, which I wish would be arrested ere long. But he might well lose the next election, although things are going fairly well for him at the moment. I don't think Congress has got a particularly charismatic leader. That's my penny's worth on Indian politics. So please subscribe to me, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and book online lessons in all sorts of subjects. I translate from French, Spanish, Romanian, German, and Italian, and Russian. Anything else? I'm a tour guide in London, one of these centuries when it opens up. That's all. Toodaloo.